What is up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. I am Andrew. I'm representing the Stars and Stripes on this podcast, and we have Faisal holding down the crown for the UK, but temporarily in Dubai. Faisal, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm feeling warm, but I'm feeling excited to get stuck into this episode. A lot to discuss here today.
It is quite true. The fact that you are probably warm over in Dubai and that we have many, many things to discuss. Like, we have these episodes coming out usually every 2 weeks, and so much happens in that 2-week chunk. It is just wild. So we're not holding back. Let's dive in right away. First, let's talk about some of the recent matches that have been happening around the world. Quite a few important ones going down. First, I'm going to talk about MLS so we can get that out of the way very quickly. And we talked about this in the last episode. So if you heard, the Columbus Crew of the MLS, so that's more so my local team, they ended up getting to the CONCACAF Champions Final. So that is exciting. It is kind of a play off of the Champions League. It's essentially the best club teams that are in the Northern America kind of hemisphere part of the world. So it's officially called the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Used to be league. They just are trying to define what cup is. But the important part, the Columbus Crew have made it to the final. That is exciting because this is the first time in their history of making it to this final. They ended up beating Monterrey, a Mexican team, 3-1 in the second leg. So I think it was 5-2 on aggregate. So they did it quite handedly, which was a bit surprising to some people because it's never been done before, like we had talked about for the Columbus Crew. But then also a team in the MLS has never beaten a team in Mexico to get to a knockout specific game like that. So that's exciting. This is, like I had said, the first Cup final for the Crew in CONCACAF Champions Cup. They play Pachuca June 1st for the final. And this is the only ever second MLS team to make it to the final. The Sounders, I think it was in 2022, they made it and they actually won. So MLS starting to pick up a little bit, and I don't really care too much about that, but I care more so about the Columbus Crew doing stuff, and they are. So it's quite exciting.
Yeah, I love that. That's huge. That's technically our local club. Let's be real, this podcast's local club. So always great to see it doing well. And it's always nice to have a bit of positivity about, not necessarily the MLS, but about American football or soccer. So excited for that. Excited for you guys as well.
Yeah, it's a good time. Good time to be a soccer fan in Ohio. Columbus Crew are ranked number 1 in the power rankings for MLS.
Wow.
The Cincinnati team, so they're kind of like rivals, but I still appreciate any Ohio soccer doing well. They were actually ranked number 2 for a bit, but now they've dropped to 7. So at least they're up there, but a lot of good stuff happening around the world of soccer in Ohio. So that is exciting.
Great stuff.
But let's talk about the actual Champions League, like the real big one that's popular around the world, because a lot of action has been happening. Our final is set. So, Faze, do you want to talk to us about the previous 2 games that got us to this final?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we know obviously there was 4 teams in the semi-finals, and it was an interesting matchup. So obviously you got Bayern Munich versus Real Madrid. The way that's lining up, you're thinking Bayern Munich a lot to prove here. They've had a fairly poor season. Harry Kane's in the squad, but they're building momentum as well. And obviously, you've got Real Madrid here in the situation where it should be for them, a comfortable seat to the final. But an interesting game actually. If you ended up watching that one, so it is started off fairly bright from a Bayern Munich perspective. So they are score a goal. They're sort of in a fairly good position. They're at 68 minutes and they're 1-0 up, and it's looking, they can just kind of get themselves and get another goal, and they should be better to kind of go through. And then you got Joselu. In the 88th and 91st minute. If you haven't seen those goals, check out the highlights. I mean, there's some great saves in that. Jude Bellingham has played incredible on that great performance in that game, and it's just typical Real Madrid. It's as close as it's going to get from like a goals perspective from a super sub in that specific area as well, to score goals in that kind of such a quick fire goals in 88 and 91, just crazy, and sinks essentially Bayern Munich from making it to the finals. So they are of course through. There's lots of stuff and lots of jokes lots of memes about them if they ever played by a Leverkusen in the UEFA Super Cup, for example, if that gets to that level. Anything after 90 minutes, you can just guarantee there's like loads of memes about being like 5-5, 4-4, and it just being a never-ending game. There's like a hole in the matrix if Real Madrid ever played by Leverkusen and it was the 90th minute 0-0. So so Real Madrid is our first pairing that's going in. I mean, no one expected anything less, right? Let's be real. Obviously, great pedigree from Champions League. And then the shocker, shall we say. So PSG were sort of 1-0 down. You're thinking, is this going to be an opportunity for them to really come back? This is Kylian Mbappe's potential last game at this moment in time. You're thinking Dortmund haven't really had a crazy season. They had a massively good run. But you'd think that PSG would come back from 1-0. But no. And this is the first one. This is the first shocker, I would say. Sancho is now going to be in the Champions League final for Borussia Dortmund, actually winning 1-0 with Matt Hummel's goal in 50th minute. So I don't know what that says about Borussia Dortmund. Does that say more about Dortmund than it does PSG? Interesting one. But yes, so Dortmund are into the final. So it's going to be on June the 1st. Mark your calendars. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you've already marked your calendars, let's be real, right? Who hasn't marked the calendars for the Champions League final? Crazy, right? You've got Real Madrid versus Borussia Dortmund. Andrew, what is your thoughts on that final?
It was pretty much what I expected, 50%. Because that 50% is Real Madrid. That's what I had predicted. Most of the world predicts it. And even when they get into nervy situations like being one down, you always know something crazy is going to happen that at least will give Real Madrid a chance. That absolutely did happen. One of the best final matches to get to a actual Champions League final in a while. It's just so exciting, the drama that the Champions League brings out. So that was super exciting to watch. That was a phenomenal game. But like what we expected. However, the non-50% was Dortmund making it through. I was fully expecting PSG to handle them quite easily. I anticipated there could be some issues for PSG because Dortmund had a decent amount of form coming into this game. But PSG, I felt, were the much more informed team, especially with the attacking slew of players that they have, always causing dangerous attacks toward the other's goal, and quick counterattacks can happen at any point in time. And we saw a lot of that actually in the Dortmund game. They had a lot of great chances. They just couldn't finish. I remember one specifically, Mbappe just rifles it and smacks it off of the woodwork. There's probably still a dent from that, but it is just crazy that they were unable to finish the different chances that they did have. And I mean, credit to Dortmund. They did what they had to do. They powered through. They figured out a way to get a goal and to ultimately hold PSG back and then get a win, which is really tough to do against a PSG team that does have talent in it. I wouldn't say the most structured and deep team around, but you always have to be afraid of Mbappe. So it is a little bit surprising that they couldn't at least get a draw to force it to go into extra time. But like I said, credit to Dortmund. They deserve to be where they are. So it should be an exciting matchup. I'm looking forward to the Champions League final happening on June 1st and also the Champions CONCACAF Cup happening that same exact day as well, which is just wild. So a lot of champion stuff happening the same day.
Yeah, it's going to be a packed weekend. It's going to be fun, lots of football, but also thinking about the quality of football that's going to be on the show. That's the interesting thing. That's what we're looking forward to. I do hope it's a good final, just because I don't want Real Madrid to walk it. I would prefer just having some form of battle. Those sorts of games. I mean, Real Madrid are going to turn up no matter what the situation is. So I just hope it's a close final. And part of me slightly would love Dortmund to win, mainly because I'm a big Marco Reus fan, right? And him being at Dortmund and getting to this level, and I think he's pretty much clear. It's been pretty much confirmed that he will be leaving Dortmund at the end of the season. So just having that for him would be amazing. So yeah, I think it'd be great to see him lift the cup for sure.
Marco Reus is one of my favorite players as well because he has a similar style of play that I tried to emulate when I was playing back in college. So he was one of my favorite players. But I'm going to do something illegal. I am going to actually do my take it or leave it right now because it relates to the topic that we are discussing currently. So take it or leave it. Real Madrid are going to have an easy path to the Champions League trophy against Dortmund. You taking that or you leaving it?
Ooh. So you're saying, like, from the way that the path of essentially the tournament came through, they kind of got lucky with the draw, essentially, right?
Actually, no. I'm just telling you, hey, Real Madrid are going to have an easy time against Dortmund. They're the better team, clearly, so it's going to be pretty simple
you were
math
just
for
saying
them.
on that night.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a tough one. I mean, I would tend to agree, but when it comes to cup finals, players turn up out of nowhere. And with the idea, obviously Sancho has been fairly good at the moment, so I think maybe he may potentially turn up. You've obviously got Hummels in centre back, for example, scoring goals, but also being into that position where he's getting older, and these players potentially won't be going on for many more seasons. So that's another kind of opportunity. And to top that all off, you got Marco Reus as well. So I don't think it would be a walkover, and I don't think it'll be an easy game. So I'm actually going to leave it, right? But I do think Real Madrid will end up winning, and that's mainly to do with Champions League pedigree, less so to do with Borussia Dortmund being a poorer team or being a poor performance in the day. I think when you're building teams like Real Madrid has done, and when you're like Carlo Ancelotti, you've got certain players like your Camavinga, for example, you've got Jude Bellingham, Vinicius. Like, these players aren't gonna just let it go to the 85th minute at 0-0 or 1-1. They're going to want to get a goal. So that's irrespective of Dortmund. That's more to do with the players' mentality and what Carlo Ancelotti's done for the team. So I'm going to leave it and say it's not going to be easy, but they will end up winning. I don't want that to happen, but hey.
I'm going to actually take this one. I think that Real Madrid will have an easy path to get the trophy. No shade to Dortmund. I actually would be okay with Dortmund winning. I think it would be cool. And like you had talked about Marco Reus, I'm a big fan. So if he could get the trophy as he leaves Dortmund, like, perfect story. That's what we want to see. But with the momentum that Real Madrid are going to take off of that last minute kind of winner in the previous match, I'd love to see a stat the following game after Real Madrid does a game like this, where they end up winning in dramatic fashion toward the end of a game, what that next game looks like for them. Because I have this bias in my head. It's not based on any stats or anything, but I think that they take the momentum from that previous game and then do well in the next game. So I am anticipating that will be the case, and I think they ultimately win fairly easily. Again, I hope this doesn't happen, but I am going to take that and say, yeah, Real Madrid, Champions League champions.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I can definitely see where you're coming from for that. Speaking of Champions League, I'm just going to bring in. We spoke about PSG earlier, and I think it makes sense for us to discuss exactly what we kind of spoke about earlier in terms of Mbappe. He's confirmed will be leaving PSG. He obviously has been and will probably forever be PSG's best player. What he's done for the league, what he's done for French football, and what he's done for PSG is it's up there, right? There needs to be some sort of statue built because it's an incredible player. However, I feel there's probably only one club he's going to go to, and that is Real Madrid. My question to you is: do they need Kylian Mbappe? Does Real Madrid need Kylian Mbappe? That's the question.
I think the answer is no. I don't think they need him, but it's the same situation as Manchester City were in with Haaland. Did they need Haaland? Probably not. They probably would have still won just as many games and maybe been just as competitive, maybe not even more competitive. But when you have the ability to sign a player of that level and is very interested in being a part of your club, because historically he was a fan and a Cristiano Ronaldo fan when Ronaldo was at Real Madrid. So like you have that history too, kind of same with Haaland, like with his father and City. So I think the storyline is there. So it's almost perfectly set up for him to be there. And you, of course, know that Real Madrid with the Galacticos, they like that vibe. They want to have just those pure dominant players that are better than everybody else, and having that all-star squad put together. It's kind of like in the NBA where they have super teams where you have those three massive stars that got together, like you were talking Boston Celtics maybe 10 years ago. So it's kind of the same vibe. I think it does make sense. I would absolutely try to sign Mbappe if I was Real Madrid, and it just feels like it does fit perfectly. Now, I don't know stylistically what will happen. I don't know if Carlo Ancelotti will still be there long enough to create a system that will integrate Mbappe in an appropriate way, because that is a situation that City had kind of seen where Haaland didn't fully fit in exactly as Pep had wanted. It took some time to get him where he needed to be to scoring goals like a machine. So I'm going to be interested to follow the process of him getting integrated into the club and the structure that the manager creates for him. What are you thinking, though? You think that they need him?
See, this is the thing. Do you remember, maybe it was a couple of seasons ago, there was all that stuff about Mbappe maybe going to Real Madrid, and I think maybe they had an offer for him, and it was back and forth between him and PSG. I think at that point, they needed him. I feel like the ship has sailed a little bit. That's in my opinion. And I feel that's because they've got Jude Bellingham for 100 million, right? And flying. They've got obviously Vinicius, who is, Vinicius is incredible player. And he's really come into his own. Back a couple of seasons ago, maybe he wasn't the Vinny that he is now, right? These players just coming into play where I feel like, does he really fit in? And my point potentially is that they need maybe more a player like a number 9, like a Haaland, potentially to finish. I don't think they've really got an out-and-out striker, really. They've got that super sub that kind of comes in and obviously scored in the 88th and 91, but there isn't really like a striker. And I don't think that really Mbappe obviously fits into that mold of like kind of the Haaland mold. There isn't many Haaland mold players out there, so they're fairly limited. But to have Mbappe in that team is incredible. But I just don't think, does he really bring that team to like a 10? Like basically the way I kind of see it is, back in the day, a couple of seasons ago, they were probably like a 8 out of 10, and Mbappe made it a 10. But now at the moment, I think they're probably like a 9 or 9.5, and probably Mbappe makes them a 10, but it's not. He doesn't bring as much as perhaps other players have brought so far. So that's just my opinion on that. And I think that, he's obviously a great player, and like I said, there's only one club he's going to go to. It's Fabrizio Romano. We know the main guy, and on Twitter who follows him, and even he's saying it. And it's going to come out sooner or later. Real Madrid done. That team is going to be insane with him in, but it's just not sure if they need him or not.
Yeah, I'm curious to see the integration, because that will be the piece for me that will tell if he's like fitting where he needs to fit. And if Real Madrid see that he's not fitting in appropriately, are they going to adjust their squad, get rid of certain players and try to bring in other players? That will be curious to me. I'm looking forward to seeing that integration. But let's talk about the losers in this situation, PSG. So they are not going to have their star talisman anymore, which it could have been a good situation, of course, because he is French. So it would make sense for him to play for maybe the best French team. And like, that's an exciting thing to have that French player playing for a French team when it's not necessarily the best league. He could have been a figure for the league to try to increase Ligue 1 to make it more of a powerhouse when it comes to the ranking of the leagues. So a lot of stuff could have gone right, but apparently it did not. We know the drama over the past few years as well of him saying he's going to leave sooner, and all the drama of him with PSG and the owner and the board and all the management there. So what does it look like now that PSG are going to be losing him?
I honestly I'm not sure what's really next for PSG. I think I'm not really looking at their squad. There really isn't any standout players for me that are from back in the day. Do you remember there was there was Cavani, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, for example. I remember playing on FIFA. You wanted PSG because they had the players. Lavezzi, Blaise Matuidi, like these players that were like incredible. Verratti, for example, and yes, they've also got some great players. But I looked at their squad and I was like, I can't really see any players really stepping up to the point. And even their manager as well was, when it was announced that Mbappe was going to leave, he just kind of left him out of a couple of the games. And I saw some of their highlights of the game that just wasn't really clicking for me. Some of their performances didn't really click. And it's evident, it's obvious that Mbappe is the spark. He will be the spark of pretty much any team in world football, but he still is always the spark. And without that spark, I honestly don't know what's going to happen. What I would love to see is another team do what Bayer Leverkusen had done in Bundesliga, and really what Monaco did, for example, and do something which is like maybe like a Marseille, for example, come through and to kind of get into that position where they are challenging PSG. I would love to see. I think that will happen. I think, in answer to your question, I think the league will potentially become a lot more challenging. There'll be a lot more players in there. There'll be a lot more kind of players fighting for other teams, more squads, more depth in squad, where it's not just one player just completely just steamrolling, one team steamrolling. So I think it'll be an interesting season. And my prediction would be for next year is Ligue 1 next season is probably what the Bundesliga has probably been this season, with the likes of Bayern Munich and Bayer Leverkusen and Dortmund, etc., coming through. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. It makes the Ligue 1 a very interesting place next season. So yeah, overall interesting.
I think it is interesting. So losing a talisman is always hard because he is like the core of your team, and they have kind of built their team around him, but not fully. I just don't think they did the best job of getting the pieces that they need to have in place to support Mbappe the best so that they could be such a dominant team. They were close, but I think they were off a bit. So now that he is removed from the roster, I'm curious to see what the process will look like of bringing in maybe another talisman type of player to fill that star role, or are they going to try to develop maybe like a Kolomoani or Barcola as the star player to fill those shoes? So it's kind of like when the main striker that I'm blanking on his name from Real Madrid, and everyone's going to punch me in the face for it because he won the Ballon d'Or. What is this dude's name? He's bald. He plays in the Middle East now.
Oh, Karim Benzema.
Karim Benzema. That's the boy. Holy cow. I don't know where I lost his name in the depths of my mind. But it's so he goes from Real Madrid, a little bit of a surprise. Like, it wasn't talked about 100% as like a sure thing. And then he makes the decision to leave. Who do you fill that with? So their situation, they didn't necessarily take a star because they were thinking Mbappe was going to be coming sooner, maybe then a little bit later. But then they waited, just had some good solid pieces, as PSG does now, and Jude Bellingham ends up stepping up and really being the player that can fill those shoes. So that's why I'm kind of comparing to see what will happen. Will they try to buy a player to fill it, or are they going to try to push one of those players that they currently have that has star potential to fill that role? I'll be curious to see what that looks like because they do have a lot of good pieces on their roster still. It's going to be a curious offseason for them, but I think if they have those right role players, they do bring in maybe a couple more pieces that fit in the right spots and either develop someone into that star role that can take that step, or buy one and then plug and play the right person in the right situation, which I don't know if their manager is the right person to do that. We'll have to find out, but I am curious to see how it will all play out for PSG and for Real Madrid when this thing does end up happening.
I'm just looking at the squad here, right? And you mentioned obviously Colin Mawani, who's a great player, obviously known from the French team. But aside from that, Gonçalo Ramos, who if we're honest, he had a good World Cup, and that's no one really heard of him until that point, right? Ousmane Dembele, who's mixed, has some really good flashes and can be great, but can be really awful in certain games and go really missing. Asensio, which again, I don't know really, is he a player that increases the depth of the squad? And then you got Barcola, who's fairly new to the game, right? In terms of for PSG. Their midfield, I'm just looking at it, and Vitinha maybe, Fabian Ruiz, but there isn't really anyone else. There's an Ethan Mbappe, so his brother's in that space, but I think there's no one really in there aside from that. That gone are the days where you're like, wow, they were stacked in midfield and up front. And then up in the sort of like defenders point specific area, they've got Hakimi, Kimpembe, who's been out with an injury for a while, Marquinhos, who's getting old, right? We all know that. Lucas Hernandez, Skriniar, Kazawa's leaving. So I don't know. They're going to need to delve into this market, I'll be honest. That makes it a bit more scary, obviously, because Manchester United are in that space as well, and we're trying to get players, and you've got PSG in that space, and we'd like to go to an easy cup, for example, the Ligue 1. So interesting season next season, if you want to see for Ligue 1 in particular, but we shall see.
Yep, I think so too. I think this squad, you're right, it doesn't have star-studded talent, but I think it does have a lot of core pieces that they can play a specific role, like I had talked about in previous episodes. Like, if you have those core players that can fill a specific need, and then you build around a star player or two, you can be in a good spot, as we saw with Bayer Leverkusen. I think that could be what PSG could be like if they implement the right strategy. They have the right manager, which again, I don't know if this is the right situation for him, but then I think they could be good and have a really good season. But I'm much more into the parity idea of Ligue 1 being more interesting because other teams can now compete a bit more effectively. If I had to guess, I think that's the route it will go. I don't think PSG is organized enough to make themselves into a machine with the right systems to be able to just be so dominant. So I am looking forward to Ligue 1 next season. As we kind of finish talking Champions League vibes, there are two teams that have qualified for Champions League play that are kind of surprising. Maybe if we would have said this at the beginning of the season, people would have been like, maybe it might be a little bit crazy to suggest this. Like when I suggested that Hungary would win the Euros, you're like, maybe not. So those two teams, Aston Villa and Bologna, two of maybe the mid-tier usual teams performing very well in their domestic leagues. We're excited to see it. Are you excited to watch them in the Champions League?
Yeah, I mean, I always love those matchups. I think I felt like the same way for Newcastle this season, Newcastle versus PSG. Like these, you would never see this normally. And the fact that these sort of teams performed well in the Premier League deserve it. And it's going to be a great adventure. I'm excited for the players, right? To be able to go out there and play in these great stadiums and these group stages. And it's going to be so interesting. And actually, they're going to be in that new format, correct? Where they have this new league style, which I was really excited about Man United being in that. I really wanted to see those games. It would have been so cool to do that, and we'll break that one down later on. But it's going to be an interesting one. Exciting for the players in particular as well, especially for Aston Villa. I mean, what a season they've had. To now be confirmed to be in Champions League, Aston Villa in Champions League is fantastic, and it does great stuff for the city of Birmingham as well to have a Midlands team in that space and to be able to play Champions League, which is great as well. Again, Bologna, first time in 60 years. Right, that's huge for a small Italian town. I think that's incredible to be out here, like Bologna versus say Real Madrid, maybe, or it's gonna be a great time for those players in particular as well, especially for Italian football to have those sorts of teams in that space as well. It only makes the Serie A better, right? When you're playing in such a great domestic league and then going out and playing in Champions League with incredible players as well alongside you. So it's really, really going to be exciting. I can't wait. What are your thoughts?
I'm looking forward to it. I always love seeing teams that are not usually in the Champions League because it creates more of those underdog vibe type of games. And I usually come from a team perspective as a fan, and like growing up in a small town, all the teams I played for and usually support are more the underdogs. So that just creates more excitement for me. So I always love to see that. I've been to the city of Bologna, so it's really cool. It's like it is a smaller city vibe. Nice.
Beautiful.
It is such a cool city. So big fan for them. I'm super supportive. I'm hoping that Bologna can do the Cinderella story, cause some upsets. I'm here for it. So very excited for those teams and for some more Champions League action next year. And I am curious to see what the format will bring out of some of these different games and some of these different matchups. So we shall see.
So do you know how you did your take it or leave it? I'm going to throw my take it or leave it into this space. I feel like it's linked, right? So as I spoke about, obviously Aston Villa had an incredible season, Champions League, some great performances, great victories against top 4, top 6 clubs as well, which is really great to see. My take it or leave it is Unai Emery, manager of the season. Thoughts?
I'm here for it. I do enjoy seeing managers that are able to take clubs that are at a certain level and then you can see the improvement. Everyone is able to see it. I value that more than a team like Manchester City with a manager like Pep Guardiola who just consistently stays at the same spot and like wins over and over, which is phenomenal and tough to do. I get that. However, having like the best front office, the best manager, the most amount of money, the most support, it like kind of adds a little caveat for me in terms of who is going to be the best manager. Seeing what Unai Emery has done with this club, I feel is more impressive because it's more difficult to do this than what with the resources Pep has to do what he has done. So I know that's tough and it's difficult too because City, if they do end up winning the league, it's like the 4th time in a row, which has never been done before for like an English top tier. So it's tough, but I am going to take this. I think I'm taking it if I'm saying it the right way because Unai Emery should be the manager of the year. I don't really know who else is in competition for him. I mean, other than Pep.
Even if Pep, like you said, like wins the Premiership and also most likely the FA Cup as well. That's 2 cups in that space, maybe potentially. Or even, would you argue, and we throw another one, Arteta in that space because they've had an incredible season. Arsenal, irrespective of what happens, have had an incredible season. So are you saying Unai Emery over Arteta and Pep Guardiola, who are essentially fighting for that?
I am. I'm kicking Arteta to the curb right away. Like, he's not even in the conversation for me.
Fair.
I appreciate what he's done, and it is cool. So he's done a great job, but it's still the same spot he was last year. Like, they were fighting for the title, and it looks like they'll probably not beat out City. Now, if they do beat out City after this final week of playing, this final game weekend, I guess you can call it, then I could be more interested in chatting about Arteta, because then that could mean he's finally broken through and done something that is quite impressive. I feel like the same Unai Emery has already accomplished that, so he's on the table for sure with that conversation. Then if the thing happens with City for Pep, they do win those 2 trophies, then he's on the table to have that conversation. So I think it has to kind of play out a little bit toward the end of the season to see who's on the table to have the discussion with Emery. But Emery's already sitting there, and he deserves to be there, and I think he will ultimately should be at the top at the very end of all this.
Agreed. That makes sense. I like that.
What are you saying? Who you picking? Are you going with Emery or not?
My thoughts are I was 100% agreeing with you. It's got to be Unai Emery. There's no two ways about it. Champions League with a squad which is a great squad, by the way, but it's technically an overperforming squad. And any manager can take an overperforming squad to the Champions League with a very competitive league. I don't want to throw in any things, but would they really be top 4 if Manchester United weren't that bad and Liverpool weren't that great and Spurs didn't drop off? Or even Chelsea had, I just feel, and this is me just thinking a little bit separately here, aside from the point, but I just off the back of what we're talking about, I feel like if you look at the clubs that probably would be in that space, you got your Chelsea, Liverpool, and you've also got Manchester United, right? And those are the 3 clubs that have had Liverpool, fair play, right? They're clear, right? That's fine. But you're looking at Chelsea and Manchester United, who've had really poor seasons. Is that us having poor seasons, or is that Aston Villa just performing better? That's the way you would have to look at it, really.
Well, I do take that perspective, and it makes sense, but it's just too bad for those clubs for sucking. That's their own fault for not managing it appropriately. But then you'll look at other teams too, like Newcastle. They've kind of set themselves up for success. They have good teams. They now have more money, resources available. I think they have a decent manager, but they weren't ending up able to just get past that point to be where Aston Villa are. The same thing with Brighton. Brighton were in a good spot last season. They were super competitive again toward the beginning of this season, but then they just couldn't pull it out because it's a difficult thing to do. Even when some of the top 6 teams weren't able to perform where they normally perform, to be able to still compete in all of the different games throughout the season and to get where you need to be in that 4th spot against competition from every team, that is always difficult to play no matter who you are, where you're at in the table. So I think it is so impressive for him to still be there. I do think it would maybe have been more difficult if some of the teams that are usually better were better, of course, but I still take nothing away. I still think it's so impressive to be able to run through a Premier League season and be where you are.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'm with you. Speaking of the Premier League, I've just thought something that just came to my mind, and as we were speaking about Champions League clubs, clubs going to the Champions League and the Premier League standings, I think we need to do a bit of a round of applause for Leicester City back in the Premier League. Jamie Vardy's back in the Premier League. Sorry, let me just Leicester and Jamie Vardy back in the Premier League, and also Ipswich Town and McKenna, who is a disciple of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, also making it into the Premier League. So I'm excited for next season. I think, it's great to see if you haven't watched some of the free-flowing football that Ipswich have been playing, honestly, check it out. Granted, it is definitely a very hard league, and unfortunately, likes of Burnley, for example, haven't really clicked. And my prediction was I thought they'd do better than they were, but unfortunately, they are relegated. But it was the fact that now you've got players and managers that are of new managers, for example, like McKenna and Jamie Vardy came back into the fray again. I'm excited. It's going to be a really interesting season next one.
It will be fun. I am looking forward to that. I am a big fan of Jamie Vardy. He helped me do well in my Premier League fantasy season a couple years back, so he will hold a special place in my heart. Very appreciative to have him back in the Premier League. Along with Ipswich, very cool to have a team of that stature in the Premier League as well, hopefully causing some problems. Being an American, that was not really the news. The news was more so that Ed Sheeran was a fan of Ipswich Town, and he was the one supporting them. So it was definitely spun differently here, but it's so cool.
He sponsored their kit as well, didn't he?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
The tour on it.
So appreciate that. Appreciate at least the news of world soccer coming here in some fashion. If it has to go through like a major celebrity, at least we're getting it to the masses somehow. So I'm appreciative of that. The sad news, though, we do have the relegations solidified in the Premier League. So on the flip side of the coin, at Sheffield United, we knew that a few weeks ago. They were going down a very rough season for those with 16 points to their name. So they have the chance to maybe add 3 more in the final weekend of play, but a very disappointing season. So they will be going down. Burnley also making the tumble down with 24 points. And then sadly, against my prediction, I was saying that Luton Town would barely survive, and they almost did. They were very close, but now it is confirmed that they, with 26 points, will be going back down to the Championship.
So Burnley, for me, it is a really sad one because I had a lot of hope for Vincent Kompany. I think what he did for the Championship in Burnley and how his performances were and how he got the club playing was great. And I saw some quite interesting sort of look back from Match of the Day about what went wrong really for Vincent Kompany. And there was a couple of past maybe 10, 15 matches they've played. There's just too many errors in the back, in the defence. There's just too many errors going through. And at this point in this level in the Premier League, you're going to get 100% punished. I think that is also the problem. He's got them playing well, but just the mistakes they're making and the clubs around them are just too strong. Luton, again, for me, the brand of football they were playing just wasn't really hitting. And for me, it was very obvious very early on that they unfortunately weren't going to sort of make the cut. It is sad mainly because their stadium and the real heritage of football heritage that Luton kind of brought in is great. And then with Sheffield, they were doing great in the Premier League and in the Championship, and they've had some really good games here. If I'm honest, they've got some fairly good performances in it. It just hasn't really paid off for them. So it is a sad day, but some exciting brand of football coming through from the likes of Leicester City and also Ipswich as well. So it'll be interesting to see who that third team that comes up. So relegations are always a hard one.
Yeah, it is true. Speaking of sad news, it seems only fitting that we now talk about Manchester United, because there is the perfect symbolism of, on a rainy day, the roof just started leaking, just like the tears that we all shed as Manchester United fans. So between that, some of the players leaving, where is your headspace in terms of being a Manchester United fan?
Frankly, I'm embarrassed, if I'm honest. Where do I begin? Crystal Palace first. Should we just break that one down? 4-0. I mean, less said about that, the better. Just performances all over the shop players. I mean, I don't singling out players, but Casemiro, I get it, he's out of position, but he is, for me, just unforgivable. The past 2 performances have not been great. We are in so that's kind of part one. The second part is the injuries we have at the moment. Unfortunate, but it's really affected us. Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, Harry Maguire, who's had a bit of run of form, scoring some goals, like key players. And that also shows the lack of depth of the squad we have. That happens in City. They've got players that can slot in. They've not had Haaland for how many weeks, and they've still scored goals. And, Bernardo Silva's chipped in. They've got Kevin De Bruyne back. Like, he's an striker in himself. Like, you don't need a striker when you got him, right? You can play the ball to anybody. So I just feel like, as a club, sinking ship, linking to the water situation. So poor infrastructure. Carrington apparently isn't good enough for even to host or even to have training facilities we have. Club is in poor performances. Like, the Burnley situation was the final nail in the coffin, really. And also, to top it all off as well, like, you've got players like the likes of Wan-Bissaka, Varane, potentially Bruno Fernandes, Casemiro, doing a sort of final goodbye tour in this last game of the season. It's an absolute shambles, and genuinely, I'm embarrassed. And for me, my head's already in England. Euros. I'm already there. I was in the Euros maybe like 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I'm already there. For me, I've already put this season to bed. And the quicker Sunday comes and we wrap up this potential 8th place, by the way, let's not forget that, potentially 8th place in the Premier League with a manager and a club currently in crisis. So, I mean, need I go on? What are you thinking?
I have no changed feelings because I feel like it's just the same thing that's been happening for almost the entire season, if not longer than that. It's just more people talk about the lows that continue to happen. But again, like my emotion is at the same level of just straight disappointment because nothing is getting better. It's almost like Sir Alex Ferguson was in charge of everything at the club and then he left and then no one started doing the stuff that he was doing. So like having people come in to fix things on the stadium, having an actual transfer strategy is so funny. It's like he just stepped away and everything just went down the drain. So that is very disappointing to me. There's no real sense of talking about actually like Manchester United in its current state. It has to fully change to even become something that could even be interesting to discuss, unfortunately. So the changes that need to be made, of course, we have to have infrastructure. That's a big one. We have to have some legitimate type of transfer strategy. And I think we have to have a new manager. Talking about new managers very quickly, the structure that Ten Hag has created is not what Manchester United needs. Unfortunately, it's not really what any top tier club should be playing. It's actually more similar to what I see here happening in soccer teams in the US. So a lot of US teams, specifically on the youth side, will cater more toward the athleticism of the players that they have. So that's like a typical American thing where, oh, you're super fast, you're going to be good at sports. That's what we're going to do. We're going to kick the ball far away and you can chase it because you're the fastest player on the pitch. That's normally what we do. That's a lot of unfortunate structure that we have for our youth systems. And that's what they cater to a lot, which is very disappointing. So I have this thing of if Messi came through a program in the United States back in the day, they probably wouldn't have looked at him because he wasn't the fastest, wasn't the strongest, which happens to so many players. Think of the Messis that could have been a part of the US soccer system, but we missed out because we still cater to those types of things. We're slowly transitioning and getting better, but that's what Ten Hag does. So it's much more of a system where they don't have a possession or like a style of buildup. It's more so just relying on a quick counter where they can ping the ball out and chase. And that's the style that he wants, which just doesn't make sense with the players that we have and the level of soccer that he should be playing as the manager of Manchester United. It's just disappointing. But manager is a hot topic for Manchester United because I don't think many people believe that Ten Hag will be around next season. Are you in that camp? What's the thoughts?
I've been in that camp for about a good 6-7 weeks now. For me, what his performance. I mean, if we do pick up the FA Cup, I've heard a lot of people kind of say, "Oh well, if he somehow wins the FA Cup," I'm still like, no, this is not. It's not good enough. It really isn't. To be fair, the infrastructure's not been great. I've not seen anything for me in this club has filled me with any form of confidence in the manager. I don't like. I mean, obviously he's got a couple of seasons, but I just feel like it's just there's something really not right here, and maybe he's not the manager. Maybe it's not the right time. There was a point where everybody wanted Ten Hag. Everybody. Right, there was Man City. Everyone was after him, but and I actually cannot. And this is my question I was going to pose to you. We're both seemingly in the Ten Hag camp out, right? Out camp. Who do you really see to replace him? Like the market's quite thin at the moment, so I actually don't know personally who I would put. Like, yeah, this is that guy. I'm seeing Gareth Southgate. And I don't know how I feel about that because what he's done with England in terms of quite an overperforming team to not really get him to a point where, there should be a couple of cups, in my opinion, right? Not sure what's happening there. I just feel like if we're only linked to Gareth Southgate and there isn't really any of the managers, why bother dropping Ten Hag?
I don't even care what manager Manchester United selects next because it's not going to matter because it is still such a mess internally in the front and back office that whatever manager you put in place is not going to be set up for success. That's just the situation that we have at Manchester United. I've been talking about it for probably about 2 years now, if not longer. So nothing is going to change for the club in a better way until the front office and back office stuff gets sorted, which Ratcliffe coming in will help. He's slowly making changes, missing the mark on a few things. Unfortunately, I was having high hopes for him, but I think it's still slowly shifting in the right direction. And that has to happen before we do bring in a manager and suspect or hope that they will succeed. Now, at the top of the list, I still think is Graham Potter, just in general, because I think Ratcliffe likes Graham Potter and has wanted him to be there, which I could be interested in that. I don't know a ton about Graham Potter. Did good stuff with Brighton. Hasn't really done too much as of late. I still think he's a free agent, so the conversations have still been out there about selecting him. I don't know. I could be open to that. I think he could be a good manager. I think the other Brighton current manager, De Zerbi, has been thrown around. I mean, of course, why would he not be? He had an awesome season with Brighton as when he took over for Potter. Slowed down a bit this season, but I think the way that he manages his squad is really good. I would love to see him as the manager of Manchester United, but the problem is whatever manager we put in place is just going to not look great because of the mess that the club is in. So those would be probably the top two candidates I would be interested in seeing. Lopetegui is also someone that was thrown around a bit. I could be interested in that too. Seems like a decent manager, but like I said, I don't really care what happens because whatever manager we bring in, it's not going to matter unless you bring in a manager and give him full authority like what Sir Alex Ferguson had, and then pray that manager that you do bring in just has the ability to do what Fergie did, which is like throwing a dart at a cow that's running 1,000,000 miles an hour and praying that it hits it. Like, it's just insane to even think about doing that. So I have no hope, to be honest with you. That's where I'm at right now.
Even any of the managers that you said, none of them are really inspiring to me, and none of them feel like, oh yeah, cool, we're gonna do that. Like, ironically now, I'm waiting for Pep to leave Man City. I don't think we personally will have any chance. I also think the likes of Klopp now has gone from Liverpool. We're going to see a very interesting up and down time at Liverpool, similar to Man United, I feel. I mean, if they have a crazy season next season, fair play, but I just feel like it's going to be up and down like with all new managers. Pep is really the only real manager that's got consistency, and if he will most likely be there. What we really need to do, and something that this podcast has been campaigning for, and something that most people are campaigning for, is these 115 charges. Someone, somewhere, genuinely needs to really start looking into that properly and actually think about what's going on, because how we can watch them keep playing football, how they're still in the Premier League, how they just are around, and I can feel Pep's a bit rattled. If you see his most recent interview where they ask him about Man United, Man Chelsea winning leagues with titles with money, he's like, oh, but Man United won it with money. Chelsea won it with money as well. Like, what are we saying about those then? And I'm just like, I can feel that there's a heat catching a little bit, but with the likes of the money they've got, it's probably going to be all paid away and it's all going to be good. But if they genuinely let off Man City with that 115 charges, or nothing happens, then I don't know. I don't know what it says for English football overall, but something needs to be done, because that is just, it is ridiculous.
Yeah, it says that nothing matters and you can do whatever you want, and like maybe you'll get punished, maybe you won't. It just depends on the day and how much money you got. Disappointing that is unfortunately where we are.
Do you want to hear an interesting conspiracy? Right,
hit me. I love it. Give me my tin hat and put it on.
Manchester United. It's about Sir Alex Ferguson, right? The conspiracy is that Sir Alex Ferguson knew that David Moyes would not perform at Manchester United. He knew in his heart of hearts, he anointed him as the chosen one, right? And knew that perhaps David Moyes is, if you look at it on paper, is not an outstanding manager, right? Everton, he hasn't got that, like, he's going to be the new candidate for taking on Manchester United, and that's come through, right? And the conspiracy potentially is that he knew that, and he knew the problems at Manchester United, and he almost wanted, I mean, it's silly as I'm saying it out loud, but the concept of the conspiracy is the fact that potentially he, almost set up Man United for failure, and it was a case of there was never going to be a manager. There was a point where Jose Mourinho was in the picture before David Moyes, and he was at a point of a manager at his peak potentially around that time. But he rather had David Moyes than Jose Mourinho. Is that potentially Sir Alex Ferguson? I feel bad saying this because we're all big Sir Alex Ferguson fans, but is it a way of him kind of going, look how good I am? Here, take David Moyes.
I would say it could happen, sure. I feel like Sir Alex Ferguson has more character than that. So to maybe think about even doing that, I would not think that he would. But even if that was the case in some alternate universe, it's still up to the club to make the decisions to figure out like the next step, to have some type of process, so Fergie's getting old. He's going to transition out at some point. We need to have a contingency plan. If you don't have that plan set up in place, this is your own fault. This is the owners and the whatever type of structure they had back then, whoever was managing anything, that was all of their fault. So I would no blame at all on Fergie in the case that this is even a real thing anyway. Like, that would just be crazy because it's literally the club. They get to make the decision of who's being hired anyway. Like, it has to be signed off by the owners or sporting director or whoever was there at the time. So I would have no shade for this conspiracy theory anyway. It's all just stupid. Actually, though, Manchester United stuff that is still related. We're talking in the Saudi Pro League real quick, because apparently they're going to be signing 10 new players. And one of them may be Bruno Fernandes. Is it time for him to leave? There have been interest in the Saudi Pro League from them to him. So what are you thinking? Is it his time to leave? Who else should they sign?
No way can Bruno Fernandes leave his club. I'm sorry, I'm not having it. He can't. I can't take it. I will go to Old Trafford myself and chain myself to the changing room so he cannot leave. We can't lose Bruno Fernandes. Andrew, we can't lose him. There is nothing
Honestly,
else.
I don't even care. Take him.
It's if everyone that meme.
Whatever player is at our club, it doesn't matter. Same as the manager. Whatever manager is there, they're all going to suck until the actual organization fixes itself.
We can't lose Bruno Fernandes. We can't do it. I get it, but he's a difference between us losing maybe 2-1 rather than 3-0, in my opinion. Right? I feel like as a captain, any team without Bruno Fernandes pretty much is a better team with Bruno Fernandes in. Us without Bruno Fernandes, I can't think of that reality. There's two memes in my mind. Number one is Pep Guardiola, where he's like, we cannot replace him. Right? That number one comes to mind. The second thing is, if Bruno Fernandes leaves, it's that, like Ian Beale from, you probably know, during EastEnders, you probably may have seen the meme, when he's like, I've got nothing left. That's basically what happens if Bruno Fernandes leaves. Those are the two things that will happen. Bruno Fernandes can't leave, and if he does, the Premier would probably be for the money. It also, perhaps similar to you, its infrastructure around isn't great. So, he can't do it though. I'm sorry, I'm not having that.
I think that he probably will leave between the money that he gets offered from the Saudi Pro League and, the current state of Manchester United. Why would you even want to stay there? I would, still being at the peak of my career, as Bruno Fernandes is, looking for another opportunity, maybe with a bigger club. I don't think going to the Middle East would be my vibes, but I guess maybe if I got offered enough money, I could do that. Maybe Bruno's in the same camp. It is what it is. Honestly, the Saudi Pro League can come and purchase any player from Manchester United and take them, and I would be happy. The one caveat to that is I love Marcus Rashford. I think he's a good player. He's a good person, and he's from Manchester. That is the coolest thing. If you build your club in a way around him, I think you would be successful because he can be that star that Manchester United needs. So I would have no problem anyone else leaving, but Marcus Rashford, please stay. I know there have been grumblings out there of him maybe leaving. I really hope that is not the case. He's really the only one bright spot still at the club, unfortunately.
Speaking of clubs currently in disrepute at the moment, I think we need to speak about Spurs. Before we close out this episode and do our nutmegs, I think we need to speak about the current problem with I'm going to break it down. See, we knew that Spurs fighting the Champions League up against Man City, and if Spurs beat Man City, Spurs lost to Man City. I can't remember what it was. It was It was Man City. If they needed Spurs to win, correct? That was what they needed. Yeah. So what they wanted was, and from various Spurs fans shouting them on the pitch, they wanted their own team to lose against Man City. So as a club, you could be fighting for a Champions League spot here, right? Yet you're so buried in your own hatred for a rival club, you'd rather have your team lose. So, I mean, the thought of that even happening. I mean, yes, we're not Man City fans, but I would never, ever want us to lose a match in any capacity. I just don't understand.
It's a very weird vibe. Like, I can't even really fathom what that would be like. So just hating a team enough that I would want my team to lose so it would benefit them, which is crazy because that's like the situation that they were in. So like if Tottenham would lose, then that would benefit them. It would benefit Tottenham to lose only in the situation where it would cause their rivals to get less points and be in a worse situation, which is just crazy. Like, and to even think about the math to like connect that all together is a lot of effort.
I'm just trying to comprehend, right? So all Arsenal fans were supporting Spurs, and all Spurs fans wanted their own team to lose. It's just like if you say that out loud, it's ridiculous, right? Two big rivals. They're not even the one of the biggest rivals of world football, right? If you've got your Celtic, your Rangers, your Boca Juniors, like there's mad rivals around. Man City, Man United, Liverpool. Like there's some big rivalry, right? Still, I feel like I wouldn't want my own team to lose so I get Champions League, right? It's just I just feel like, and even there was Big Ange Postecoglou, I think it is,
Oh boy.
came out and said that in the past 48 hours, it's been made clear to me that there's a lot of foundational issues currently wrong with Spurs, and there's issues at Spurs. And what he's really referring to is then, I personally think there's some senior figures within that kind of club were kind of saying, look, we don't really mind if we lose, let's try our best, but we lose, it's okay. We don't want Arsenal to win it, so it's okay, right? And there's a clip as well of one of the fans saying, "Oh, it's okay, we can lose," like chanting that we could lose. We referring to Spurs, and Ange coming up. Look, I've heard you say that already. I'm going to get you kicked out. And he seems like a man of integrity and just wants to win games, as every manager should do, irrespective of the rivalry. So it's absolutely ridiculous for a club to want their own team to lose so another team doesn't win the Premier League. I mean, ridiculous.
That's just crazy. Like I'm a fan of Big Ange. I do like his managerial style, how he composes himself and how he constructs his teams. I would love to steal him away from Manchester United, but like I said, doesn't matter what manager you bring in anyway. The situation is weird because I would never want to lose a game. I would go out and try to win no matter what. However, if you then lose, you can then come back and say, yeah, we tried, we wanted to win. However, this loss maybe tastes a little less bad just because it also does hurt one of our rivals. Got it. Nice. That's like the way it should be because you always want to win. So I don't get that. Like I understand if maybe there's a stain. So if it's like a Manchester United situation where the club is just sucking so bad, there's poor management, there's like no structure, nothing is being repaired, roofs are leaking onto fans. Like that is just a nuts scenario. So then if you're saying like, I don't even care, just lose, doesn't matter. That makes a little bit more sense because like you want the club to struggle so that they can get rid of the current owners and all the negative people inside of it so that they can be reborn and actually be successful again. Like that scenario would kind of make sense. It doesn't make sense when you're competing to try to get into a Champions League spot and then you would want to lose. So yeah, there's just some underlying problems. Maybe that's like a case study for a psychological class I can teach someday because it is a little bit confusing, but when there is negativity around like that, you kind of see how that comes about. And unfortunately for Tottenham, that's not what you want to see from your fans. Would love to see them win and would love to have seen them beat City, which could have been a case that caused some problems, but it is what it is. Let us end this episode on a not high note, at least for mine. My nutmeg is not very happy. It actually has to do with Manchester United, so I'll throw that out there for you really quickly. So my nutmeg of the week is about Manchester United's women's team. They won the FA Cup. Lovely. Great job. Congratulations. The one bright spot in Manchester, which we don't talk about enough because we should be, because they're the only good part about Manchester United. So that had happened. But then they found out after that the end of the season awards banquet was canceled. not the biggest issue, like it could have been adjusted, but they found out it was canceled on social media. So they didn't get notified or anything. They had adjusted their flights, made travel schedules around that date. They didn't know until it was in the press. That's how they found out that the end of the season banquet was canceled. And that is just crazy because they had such a successful season and won some silverware. On top of that, the scheduling issue is the reason that it was canceled because the men are in the FA Cup final. So that was the scheduling issue that forced it to be canceled. Like, come on, get yourself together, because if that is just such a small, minute thing that is easily managed, that we manage deeper problems at Terra State with a soccer program that is coming off the ground, as well as with Delaware Rising, like scheduling conflicts and stuff. If we can manage that, come on, Manchester United, you can figure something out. But that is my nutmeg, because it's just so stupid.
Absolutely. I mean, seriously, I mean, what does that say? Does that show that perhaps the women's team is maybe a little bit disregarded in comparison to the men's team? It just doesn't seem right. Like, a lot more needs to be done, but I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Manchester in shambles at the moment, so why not? Let's have another shambles. Hey, let's add another one to the trophy of shambles at the moment. From me, it is actually regarding Arsenal and also Man City. Arsenal were actually, so obviously Man City played Spurs. Was it on yesterday? And the night before, Arsenal fans thought it would be quite hilarious to do fireworks outside the Man City hotel, right? And you thought, okay, we've heard different teams do it. You know, that means they disrupt their sleep and maybe they're not as great the next day and they're a bit groggy and they lose. It's just silly though, right? But unfortunately, no one really told them, or they should have really thought about it, that Arsenal actually play Man City and Spurs play in the evening, the following evening, 8 p.m. So they're even destroying their sleep, and then they can sleep during the day. It's just ridiculous. It's just really poor. It's not really thinking about it. I also potentially, I mean, as an Arsenal fan, like trying to like disrupt, you know, the other team. It just feels like I think it's poor sportsmanship. Do you know what I mean? You either win or you lose. As an Arsenal fan, if you didn't, there's certain game you should have won. Like, as simple as that, right? But yeah, just not really thinking about that. And you can see them; they're all hooded up. They've got their like balaclavas on, letting off fireworks, not really realizing that the next day is a late kickoff. So yeah, that's my nutmegged of the week.
Moral of the story: do your research and figure out the scheduling. That's a good moral for Manchester United to learn, maybe, from that situation. They could figure that out too. All right, fam, we are out. Thanks for joining us on this episode. We will see you in just about 2 weeks. Before then, jump on our Instagram account at Nutmeg Podcast to DM us with your listener questions or take it or leave it submissions. Hopefully, you're able to get on a pitch somewhere. Just don't get nutmegged. Peace.
Peace out, guys.